Good evening, Baruchim Habayim Rabotai. Welcome to another edition of our Thursday night's class. Tonight's class was sponsored by Mrs. Harari, Leilui Nishmat, her late husband, Rabbi Moshe ben Pesel Zechet Tzadik Livracha, Zchuto Yagen Aleinu, Amen. So it was Rosh Chodesh today. Not just Rosh Chodesh, Rosh Chodesh Shvat. Rosh Chodesh Shvat I like, because my birthday is in Shvat. But yeah, I'm getting older, believe it or not. Yeah. You see that? It's a good month for me. No, but on a more serious, I'm right before Tu B'Shvat. Yud Shvat, if you really want to know. But Yud Shvat's also a meaningful day. Lehavdil, it's the Hilulah of the Rashash. The Rashash that's buried in Har Zetim, not the other Rashash. But anyway, Shvat is a month that you would think this came from Hasidic books in the recent years, but it doesn't. It's brought down already, I don't know exactly the number, but from before the times of the Maharal. So at least 250 years and more passed. That the Sfarim HaKadoshim wrote about the month of Shvat, that Shvat's Rashi Tevot, Shenishma B'sorot Tovot, that we should hear good news. So first of all, Amen. But this year, one of the rabbis in Israel, the chief rabbi of Israel actually, when he quoted this thing from some of the sources that talk about the month of Shvat, so he said this year we have to say that the Shvat should be a month, that we got to change the first Rashi Tevot. Instead of Shenishma, that we should hear, Sheyeh, that it should be already. We should see the B'sorot Tovot already, not just in theory one day. It should be proactive right away. So B'ezrat Hashem, it should be a month, Shenishma B'sorot Tovot, we should hear, and Sheyeh B'sorot Tovot. Both Pchinot should be everything. No. It's also the beginning, it's back to months of regular holiday seasons. Cheshvan we call Mar Cheshvan because there's no Yom Tov. Kislev has Chanukah at the end of it. And Tevet, the beginning has Chanukah, but then continues into Asara B'Tevet, which will be a Yom Tov one day, but for now wasn't a Yom Tov. And then when you start with Shvat, you go straight through holidays. Shvat, Tu B'Shvat, Adar, Purim, Nisan, Pesach, Iyar, Lag BaOmer, Sivan, and the whole Iyar is Chol HaMoed. Anyway, according to Ramban, Sivan is Matan Torah. Up until Tammuz, we go like holiday after holiday. By the time Tammuz comes, Mashiach will be Shiva Asav, Tammuz will be a holiday too. But, so it's like a more upbeat time for the Jewish nation. The Mazal Klal Yisrael is very strong now also. It begins. So it's a happy time. We have to be happy. Hashem wants us to be happy. So, on Daled Shvat is the Hilulah of the Baba Sali, Zechet Tzadik V'Kadosh Livracha, Zchuto Yagen Aleinu Al Kol Yisrael. So even though I gave a shiur one year, I don't know if it was last year, a few years ago, about the Baba Sali, I felt this year again that it's important to talk about the Baba Sali. Because the Baba Sali, definitely for the Sephardic Jewry, but in a moment, maybe we'll discuss that it wasn't only for the Sephardic Jewry, resembled the closest thing that we had in the past, who knows how many years, of a fountain of miracles. And today, that the situation in the world at large, and in America specifically, feels like some sort of depressed environment, and people not knowing what tomorrow is going to bring, and everything's chaotic and crazy. So Jews that are ma'aminim, b'nei ma'aminim, get a lot of chizuk when they see the Chachmei Yisrael and Tzadikei Yisrael had the koach to be poel nisim v'niflaot fa'am Yisrael. So it's a big chizuk. So dafka tzaddik like that can give us all a certain amount of chizuk in times like this. But first I want to quote something, a thought. The thought comes from a rabbi named Rabbi Avraham Tzvi Margalit. He's the Marad Atra of a town in Israel called Carmiel. So in a speech that he gave in the year Tafshin Daled, I'm not saying over the whole speech he said there, just his initial quote. He said he decided to go to America for a visit. He didn't explain why. And on the screen in front of him, so he is a Talmid Chacham, he wasn't going to watch Mickey Mouse, beyond, or movies. Beyond that, there was nothing else really to watch. So he left the screen blank. Now the screen blank on El Al specifically, I'm sure all of you flew El Al at one point or the other, it's not blank. It's an El Al advertisement, it shows their logo and with a few words. So he paid attention that El Al has an advertisement on their home screen that, unless you do something deliberately to shut it off, stays on the whole flight, that is promoting their duty free. They already sold you a ticket. Now they have to get more money out of you. They got to get you to buy in the duty free. So the slogan that they used at that point, this changes every year or so, was this quote in Hebrew. Bamakom achi gavoa, in the highest place, meaning when you're up in the sky, b'mechir achi zol, the price is the lowest. Yeah, you have a good head, you could be a publicist for El Al. Look at that. This was their thing. And he said it actually stuck in his head, even when he flew to America, was there for a few days, flew back to Israel, came back to Israel, this thing was still in his head. B'makom achi gavoa, highest place, b'mechir achi zol, the price is the cheapest. Just stayed at his place. Knew it was a good PR guy who thought about it, to brainwash people to spend a few more dollars. Beautiful. But Hashem doesn't do anything, as the Rambam writes in the Akdamat Zraim, without it having a direct impact on a Jew, and not just any Jew, a Jew that's Talmid Chacham. So if Hashem caused some publicist to make such an advertisement on an El Al plane, obviously he wanted it to have a direct impact on the Talmid Chacham. So he said that he thought about it. He gave it some thought. And this is what he concluded. He concluded an interesting thing. That within religions, and I'm not calling the Jewish faith a religion, because it's by definition not, and we'll explain that in a moment, to get closer to whatever the entity or whatever they believe in, in many cases, not always, but in many cases, minus the Christian umbrella, it takes a lot of effort. You have these people in India and in other places that stay on top of mountains, don't talk for years, do all this other crazy stuff. God knows what they do. It takes crazy stuff from them. You got these Muslims, the radical Muslims, that blow themselves up, and you know, their kids die, and God, no end. The reason why I said I'm not willing to call the Jewish faith a religion is because, according to the best of my knowledge, the definition of religion, the universal accepted definition of religion, is doing something for somebody, whether somebody's a higher power or whatever you want to call it. The whole Jewish faith is based exactly to the opposite extreme of that. We don't do anything for anybody. Because if we're doing something for Hashem, then Hashem needs us. If He needs us, then He's not Hashem by default, because God can't need anything. The whole Jewish faith is that everything you do for yourself. Hashem did you a favor and gave you an owner's manual to your body to know what to do for yourself, to keep yourself in good shape. But we're not doing anything for God. He could do just fine without us. He didn't have to create us in the first place. That's why it pains me greatly on an intellectual level when I hear people's pain and they tell me, I did this, I read Tehillim and it didn't work, and I did this mitzvah and it didn't help, and I did that and it didn't. Really? That's what we got to? You didn't do that for Hashem, you did that for you. This wasn't a pay phone that you stick a quarter in and make a call. It doesn't work like that. You did that to elevate your soul. If it happens to be that you also got some other personal benefit out of it, no, so you got a tip along the way. But one has nothing to do with the other. You don't put on tefillin in the morning in order for something else to happen. That's not the reason why you do what you do. So that whole idea in the Jewish faith has no place whatsoever. Not the question, and honestly it shouldn't even be answered, because beyond the simple answer, everything else is just a waste of time. But now let's go to the materialistic world. Most things in the materialistic world, definitely substantial things, take great effort. If somebody wants to be wealthy, has to work hard. It doesn't come for free. If somebody wants, I don't know, even the maintenance of things, forget about obtaining them. Let's say you have already obtained it. I don't know, somebody got a big inheritance or whatever, he has a lot of access to funds. You buy a fancy car, it doesn't end there. Now you have to store it, you have to get it clean, it needs an oil change, it needs this, it needs that, there's no end. Everything needs things. So there's no point in life that a person can get something that he enjoys a lot and not have to put a lot of effort back in return in comparison to what he's obtaining. Everything's obviously in relation to what you're obtaining. The more sophisticated and expensive machinery is in general, of course, there's a few items maybe that will be different. The higher the cost of maintenance. On a very shallow level, to change a Honda Accord's tire is a lot cheaper than changing a Mercedes tire. Everything goes in proportion to what it is. No, when doesn't this rule apply? B'makom achi gavua. When a person leaves ta'avot gashmiot, things of this world down here, and goes to ta'avot ruchaniyot, he has a desire to get close to Hashem, he goes to the highest place in the world, to get close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So then dafka there, a lot of things that are big, very big, come just from the thought. If I think I want to be something today, do I become that? Imagine I walk into a hospital, into an OR, I want to do a cardiac surgery on a patient. And they see I have no tag and no nothing, and they say, who are you? We don't know your face, the team says. I said, I'm taking over the cardiologist. They said, but where are you from? We never saw you before. I said, I feel like a doctor. I also think I'm a doctor. Get arrested for that. It's called impersonating a medical personnel. It's illegal. And rightfully so. That's what I tell anybody who tells me they feel Jewish. You feel Jewish, I feel like a doctor, we all feel. Yeah. In Biden's world, people feel like monkeys, like this, like that. They feel like all different things. Each one feels something. I don't know, I'm not sure what he himself feels. He maybe doesn't feel. I don't know. Each one feels like something. It's just a stupid thing. I'm Jewish, why? I feel Jewish. Really good?
You fell in salt.
Feel. No, fell, you know my line on that. People fall in love. They fall in love. It ends there. First they fall, and then, they try to call them. But anyway, the most famous example in the past years of the Mussar movement, at least, was that Rebbe Salantas used to always quote when the Goyen was on his deathbed, and they knew he was passing away. He held his tzitziot, he was wearing tzitzit, and he held the strings of the tzitziot, and he was crying, and his students looked at him and said, Rebbe, what are you crying for? And he says, in this world, just for a few cents, I can put on a tzitzit on my body, very minimal effort, and I buy myself eternity, buy myself whole worlds. Over there, I'm going to get there, no matter what I'll give, no matter what I'll do, I can't get nothing. Zero. That means when you are dealing with high things, sometimes for a minimal effort, you can get very far. If I think about working, my boss is not going to give me a paycheck at the end of the week. If I work, he's going to give me a paycheck. If you think about Hashem, Hashem is going to give you a big paycheck at the end of your life. Just because you thought about it. That's it. So that means the greatest thing, Gan Eden, eternity, comes for the cheapest price. Minimal effort. Which, by the way, has the boomerang effect. It also goes again, it works against you too, not only in your favor. One day God's going to tell you, it was so simple, why didn't you do it? It was so simple, why didn't you do it? If it was so hard, okay, it was hard, I couldn't do it. But the basics that are so simple, what was the big deal to do? So this was the lesson that this rabbi said he learned from the Elal advertisement up in the sky. And he later on said it in his shiur on Shabbat, so obviously it must have made an impact on him. Let me tell you an interesting thing. Initially, this won't sound normal, quite frankly, but if you listen to it until the end, you'll see it might be very smart. When somebody tells you different words, you have the instinctive synonym to that word, or reaction. You have both, actually. Snakes, fear, this, that, whatever. You can play that game forever, honestly, if you're ever bored. What word instigates in you what either thought or feeling or both? When we say the word Baba Sali, naturally, the first thing that comes to mind, miracles. I'll break you an interesting piece of news. The last thing that has to do with the Baba Sali is miracles. It's just that people like the idea of miracles. So it's very convenient, Baba Sali, miracles. Yeah, it fits good, it's a feel-good thing. But that was the last thing that the Baba Sali was. Now, it sounds crazy. What do you mean? Every book you read probably only had miracles. That's all it said. That's because people didn't care enough to learn about the Baba Sali. So maybe we should learn a little bit why the Baba Sali was able to get to what he got to on the miracle, feel-good thing that we relate to, and where it really came from, and what we could take out of it as a lesson for our lives. The Baba Sali, at the age of 7, went to his father with an interesting request. Most 7-year-olds, what do they think about? They want the next toy, the next this, right? Today's 7-year-olds, they're on PlayStation 5 or whatever they're up to, and they want, that's normal, there's nothing wrong with that. L'avdil alef alfei avdalot, the Baba Sali, when he was 7, went to his father, not with a request, that would be an understatement, with a demand. What was the demand? That he wants to learn Kabbalah, Zohar. So his father told him, I don't disagree, but you're not going to understand it, so it's a waste of time. You may as well learn things that you'll understand. It's better for you. He said, really, you're right. And I'm not saying I'm going to understand it. But Reb Shimon Bar Yochai wrote that if you read Zohar, even if you don't understand it, it's as if you learned. So I'm not wasting my time either way. So if I'll understand, Ma Tov Ma Na'im, great. And if I won't understand, I didn't waste my time. I get the Sachar of Talmud Torah. So his father asks him, and who do you want to learn Zohar with? 7-year-old. Can you imagine the dialogue? Who do you want to learn Zohar with? So he tells him he wants to learn with the old Talmidei Chachamim of the generation. Whoever was there, wherever they lived. Not he didn't pick some 40-year-old, which that's the age that you start learning Kabbalah, or if you finish Shas and Poskim, you're allowed to. He picked the elders, meaning the geniuses that are already doing this for years and years. At the beginning, his father tried to push him away from it. When he saw he really wants it, he said, if he really wants it, that's a sign from Shamayim that it's for him, and he let him go learn with them. He used to learn with them every night. Learned Kabbalah mainly during the night hours. He used to learn with them every night, all night, Kabbalah. Not to affect his daily schedule, learning Mishnah and Talmud and so on. And it's argued the exact date because there's two versions of the story, but it honestly makes no difference at all. Who cares if it was a few weeks before his 8th birthday or a few weeks after his 8th birthday? It's one or the other. I don't think that makes any difference. He finished the cycle of the Zohar together with these rabbis that he was learning it with. Nobody really knew if he understood it or not, like to the depth. But one thing for sure they knew, that's also an accomplishment. For a kid that young to be able to go through the whole cycle of the Zohar consistently every night of the week, that's a record breaker. So his parents made a big siyum, a big seudah, in honor of their son, let's call it the 8-year-old, because it was either right before he was 8 or right after, one or the other, finishing the Zohar. Now in those days they didn't have chandeliers like here, beautiful. They didn't have that. So they had a different version of a chandelier. It was the same idea, but instead of crystals and bulbs, they had cups with oil and wicks. So in Abi Masud, Baba Sali's father's house, they had one big one, and they built it deliberately with 72 cups of oil and wicks. 72 keneged the name of God, Ayin Bet. Even their house construction was done according to the Kabbalah. Keneged Ayin Bet Shemot. I have a friend who's a little bit of a letz. He recently built a house. He put in 72 spotlights in his dining room and living room. He said he wants to be like the Baba Sali's father. I'm not sure that he accomplished that. All right, to each his own. He's definitely going to help the electric company. He's going to donate some money to them. That for sure he accomplished. Beyond that, I don't know if he accomplished much else. But by the Mekubalim that understood Yodei Chen, they knew things. So they had reasons of doing things. So they had this thing. Now, if you got a light like we have, so if the floor shakes a little bit or whatever, God forbid, shouldn't happen, so it'll shake. Somebody bumps into it. It'll shake a little bit for 10 seconds, and that's the end of it. But what if all the cups of oil with wicks lit on fire, something shakes? Number one, everything goes out, the room turns black. But besides for that, they can also cause fires and other things. It's not exactly the safest way of going about things. The Baba Sali himself, remember, we're talking about an 8-year-old child, was so happy in the simcha of his siyum. He was so felt so accomplished that he was making the siyum, that in the middle of the siyum, he got onto the table and he started dancing. Started dancing on the table at a Simchat Torah. This was the Simchat Torah that an 8-year-old came to. When are kids today happy? When they get a candy, when they get a new toy, when they get a new gadget. Baba Sali finished the Zohar. He went on the table, he started dancing. That's it. This is the time for Simcha. In the middle of dancing, he sees the older people looking at him. Now, he knew all along that it was weird that he went to learn with them, and it wasn't the normal. Not weird, God forbid. It wasn't the normal. The whole thing wasn't the normal. So he wanted to make a point that they should accept him for the next cycle, and that he belongs with them. So he said in Arabic, I don't know how to pronounce the words properly in Moroccan Arabic, so I'm not going to try even. I'll just give you the translation. He said 3 words. He said, in Hebrew we would say, Ani mashbi'a otcha, I'm making you swear. And he said he pointed to the lamp, to this contraption of 72 oil cups, that you'll dance with me. That's what he said. He said it out loud, so all the chachamim that were sitting there by the Sudat Siyum should hear. And from there on, he moved to the left, the lamp moved to the left. He moved to the right, they were swing dancing together. The lamp moved to the right. He moved forward, the lamp moved forward. He moved backwards, the lamp... The chachamim were mishta'im, they were sitting there. How is he able to be mashbi'a, something that's a materialistic thing, to do what he wants at such a young age? And then they realized that this is not the regular, this is not the norm, and he has above human capacities in him. But he didn't get them for free. He worked hard, very hard, his whole life. When he was 13 years old, he had an older brother. Baba Sali is a middle child. There were 3 brothers, he was a middle child. When he was 13 years old, he began fasting Ta'anit Hafsaka. You know what Ta'anit Hafsaka is? Your last meal is Sudah Shlishit, and your next meal is Friday night after Kiddush. Without even drinking water in the middle. Today they talk about, what's it called, intermediate fasting or something. That's one of the diets that's very popular. So it was invented by the Mekubalim. It's not 12 hours or whatever it is. I don't know the rules of this one. 6 days straight. Without even drinking water. Now he didn't ask his father in advance if he should do it or not, because he was scared his father would tell him no. How did anybody find out? He didn't tell anybody either. How did they find out about it? And there was a point that he went to the mikveh on Friday afternoon, and his older brother, you're asking the medical dynamics, holy people obviously don't go by the laws of medicine. Besides, if you have a large water retention, you can medically as well. He went to the mikveh Friday afternoon. His older brother, Rabbi David, who was later on killed al Kiddush Hashem, Hashem Yimkon Damo, was with him. And he saw that his younger brother was having trouble walking down the steps. And he saw nothing was hurting him. He was physically weak, he just couldn't walk. So he told him that obviously you're fasting Ta'anit Hafsaka, that's why your body's so weak. He told him, you're too young for this. You're not allowed to continue doing this. The Baba Sali told him back, what I'm allowed to continue doing or not, in general, I would listen to you. When it comes to me getting closer to Hashem, even if I'm not allowed to, I'll pay the price and I'm going to get closer to Hashem. And he didn't stop. Most of the Baba Sali's days, he fasted Ta'anit Hafsaka. Most of his years of his life. Even in his very elder years. The only reason why they had so many Sudot in his house was if it was a Sudat mitzvah, then he was willing to break his fasting. Because he wasn't willing to eat from a Sudah, it's not a Sudat mitzvah. So on Rosh Chodesh, they made a big Sudah in his house. When there was a Hilulav, a big tzaddik, they would make a Sudah in the house. Those were ways of getting him to eat something. And even when he ate, what did he eat? He served everybody the biggest shefa in the world. And for himself, he ate dry bread, crackers, the minimum of the minimum of the minimum. His body wasn't capable also of handling more food than that. But Fahiza Lepela. Now, even those that know about the Baba Sali's Geonut and Kabbalah, don't know how much of a Geonut he had in Nigla. The Baba Sali wasn't a Kabbalist. The Baba Sali was a huge Talmid Chacham in Shas and Poskim in ways that there's no way to describe in words. He also was a great Kabbalist. But he started from the basic up. For example, the Baba Sali didn't eat during the week, a lot of weeks, right, of his life. But if somebody doesn't eat a whole week, you would expect Friday night when he finally is eating, he should want to make Kiddush a second earlier. The Baba Sali, from the time he was 13 years old, Ad Sofia Mav, many people that were close to him over the years testified, each one in his period of time that he saw it with his own eyes, never made Kiddush Friday night unless he finished learning the entire Pirush of the Orach Chaim HaKadosh on that week's parasha. You didn't eat all week, you're starving. Pikuach nefesh. Literally pikuach nefesh, not even an exaggeration. But the Baba Sali's life was the Achaim HaKadosh, not food. So to him it made no difference. It wasn't a subject at all. He just lived in a different way. What does Baba Sali mean, by the way? So in his younger years, there was a technicality. It wasn't Baba, it was just Sali. Sali was the Arabic nickname for Yisrael. His name was Rabbi Yisrael Abu Chatzira. The nickname was Yisrael. That was in his younger years. At one point, I don't remember the exact age, but I think it was 9, if I remember correctly, what I heard. His grandfather, Rabbi Yaakov Abu Chatzira, came to his father in a dream and told him, you should know your son was blessed with the power of prayer. And the more he prays, the more Yeshua Am Yisrael will have. We're all blessed with the power of prayer. But certain people, Hashem gives them a special matana, that they have a special koach hatfilah in them. For example, in the Zohar, in 3 different places, the more famous one is in Parashat Yitro, when it talks about Chokhmat Hayad. Even in Chokhmat Hayad, there's a way to see that somebody has an extra koach hatfilah. But this was his grandfather telling his father about the son. And really, the Baba Sali used to pray. There was no boundaries to what his prayers knew or meant. There was nothing to talk about. There was no way to even grasp the idea of what kavanot and things went into his koach hatfilah. So Sali in Arabic also means prayer. So in his later years, when I say later, I don't mean when he was 50. When he was already 9, they called him Baba Sali. Baba in Arabic means father. The father of prayer. He's considered the master of prayers. The person who... The Baba Sali, when he was 31, went to Israel for the first time. And he had a few times that he was in Israel and then back in Algeria, France, Morocco, a lot of time in Morocco, then back in Israel, then back in Morocco again, then back in Israel for the rest of his life. That's more or less the narrative. I'm not saying the exact years now. The first time he went to Israel, one of the stops he made was in Tzfat. When he went to Tzfat, he wanted to go pray in the synagogue of the Ari HaKadosh. He saw that the synagogue of the Ari HaKadosh was locked. He asked who has the keys. They told him who has the keys. He went to the guy, asked for the keys to go in. He said, I can't give them to you. He said, why not? He said, because for many, many years already we know that anybody who goes into that room dies. So we decided to lock it so nobody should die anymore. So the Baba Sali told him, don't worry, I could take care of it. And the guy still wouldn't give him the keys. He was scared for his life. He was protecting him. And the Baba Sali told him, you have no right over my life. I can decide what I want to do. And there's a public place and whatever, al pi halacha, and he proved him, you're obligated to. He didn't know who the Baba Sali was. The Baba Sali was 30 then, 31. He gave him the keys. He gave him the keys. The Baba Sali went into the Ari HaKadosh's synagogue and was inside for 4 hours. Everybody was sure he died. 4 hours. Right? They were banging on the doors and the windows and the this and the that, calling his name. En kol ve'en oneh. Nobody answers. Nothing doing. They were sure that was the end. After 4 hours, he came out. Came out, he looked at everybody and he smiled and he said, you see, I came out, I solved the problem, from now on it should stay open, nobody's going to get harmed there. And if any of you went on any tours to Israel, you probably went to the Arizal synagogue without even knowing it. And the reason why you were there was because there was a man, when he was 31 years old, that had the power to take away the kpedav, the kedushav, the Bet HaKnesset Ari, that over there nobody was even allowed to have a machshava zara, a thought that wasn't 100%. So people should be able to go in and get the zchut to pray there and not get harmed. And if you were never there, God willing, Israel, bli ayin hara, is the #1 country in vaccines in the world. Hashem is just showing His ways. And they say they're reopening in March to everybody. In New York, there's nothing to look for anymore anyway. So we should go spend some time in Israel. And then we'll spend some time in Arizal Shul also once we're at it. And we could daven in holy places. If God forbid Mashiach's not here before that. No, I think last Wednesday already gave us the final nail in the coffin of America, that we understand that there's nothing left. Somebody gave me a CD of mine. It's very rare that somebody gives you your own CD. It's pretty weird, no? That I put out 16, 17 years ago. I don't know exactly. It doesn't say the exact year, but based on where it was, I didn't speak there in over 15 years, so it must be 16 years at least. I was talking about this was the beginning of social media becoming famous, the names of social media were very even different than today's names of social media. And when I listened to it, I was like, wow, if I put it on YouTube, this can make me a celebrity quickly. I literally said there'll be a day that this will make presidents and take down presidents and cause mass destruction and mass murder in the world, and it will be censored by the left wing, and they're going to promote their disgusting agendas against God by censoring anybody who has any common sense in the world. That was the entire blueprint of what I said in the speech. I wish I was wrong, what should I tell you? Unfortunately, we all saw it live. So at this point, for years I've been begging people to shut their stupid Facebook and this and to stop ruining their lives. At this point, I'm not even willing to go down that road anymore. It's a waste of my voice. I just tell somebody, if you're pro killing people, keep your Facebook. If not, shut it down. It's as simple as that. That's where it starts, that's where it ends. This is an institution right now that's censoring anybody who's pro-life. So if you're pro-killing babies, have Facebook. If not, not. Now you're going to tell me, but it's indirect, it's not true, it's this, it's it. I agree with everything. I want to ask you a question. God forbid should never happen. There was a synagogue on fire. You're a heavy smoker. You got a cigarette without a light. That's the biggest torture for a heavy smoker. Would you go to the synagogue that's on fire to get a light? I don't think so, right? If you saw somebody doing it, what would you think? Majnun, Rasha, evil. What's wrong with this guy? This social media is putting Hashem's Torah and every Jewish value that exists on fire in the biggest, nastiest way in the world. And you're lighting a cigarette from it by using it? How are you not embarrassed? Disgusting. So at least Google, which I'm looking, I think we should find an alternative as Jews, honestly. But at least we say there's no choice. Today everybody Googles everything. Not that it helps, it makes the world a crazy place, but whatever. But the other outlets, it's interesting, I looked up, even in the COVID era, that everything is COVID death, this, that, I never yet saw a death certificate that said cause of death, no Instagram. Cause of death, no Facebook. I never yet found one. If you find one, send it to me, I want to see it. Nobody died without it. Ask anybody who's over 30. They lived without it just fine when they were young too. And we have to support these lowlifes by using their outlets and their platforms that are deliberately going against Hashem and His Torah, that are openly doing it. At least when they hit it, we had an excuse. Now, as of last week, it's all out in the open. They don't deny it, they say it openly. We have an agenda and we're going to do what we want. So now we have to support it. And I'm not talking about conspiracy theories of data and this and that. Know about me whatever you want. I don't care. That's nonsense to me. I'm talking about the idea. It's something that a Jew has to think about. It's really something a Jew has to think about. I don't know what the criteria are, so I'm not giving you practical implications. I don't know what yes and what no, how we draw the line. I don't know. I hope there'll be a Gadol Torah that will draw the line for us. But it's definitely something that has to be thought about. So back to the Baba Sali. The Baba Sali was first a Gaon in Shas and Poskim. The Baba Sali wrote thousands of pages of Chidushei Torah in Shas and Poskim, many that he himself buried. He didn't want to become famous as an Adam Gadol in that area, so he purposely buried. Some that unfortunately over the years were stolen and destroyed, and by Muslim terrorists and other things, and that's why not a lot of it is left for us. And the little that's left, you see Geonut that knows no boundaries. Before he was even known as a Kabbalist, his first position was a Dayan. He was a Posek Halacha, that's what he started out as. Later on, he also became famous as a Baal Kabbalah, but his foundations were in the Halacha, which for us today is a very big lesson. The Kabbalistic quote-unquote move became very popular and trendy, and every second guy calls himself a Kabbalist. All you got to do is make a few weird faces, grow a beard, and you're a Kabbalist already. Unfortunately, 99.9% of them are frauds. Sorry to say it so bluntly. And what makes them frauds, forget about if they mean well or not. I don't care what they mean. If I mean well, I still can't do a neurosurgery. It's until you don't learn Shas and Poskim, you have no right even getting close to Kabbalah. But it takes years and years to learn Shas and Poskim. Ask any yeshiva boy that went to high school and Bet Midrash and Yeshiva Gdolah and Kollel and whatever. So, by default, the whole thing is not... it's disgracing Torah Sod. It's making a mockery out of Torah Sod. It's also misguiding people to go to blessings by people, and then the blessing doesn't work, and then he doesn't believe in God. It's a treacherous cycle. This thing has to come to an end. And that's why so critical to stress. The Baba Sali's koach didn't come from his Kabbalah. That might have been an addition. It came from the fact that first he was a posek halacha. He was a gaon in Shas, and in all the Rishonim and Achronim and Poskim, down to the Torah of the Hasidim even. He also learned Kabbalah. He also knew Kabbalah in many forms. He also knew Kavanot in many forms. He also knew that. Also. But that's not where he came from. Now we take it a step further. We said he used to not, the Orach Chaim HaKadosh, about the Orach Chaim HaKadosh, he used to not eat until he... So I heard a story, not live, on video, from Rabbi Mordechai Eliyahu. Rabbi Mordechai Eliyahu was a rabbi first in Beersheba. Then he was the chief rabbi of Beersheba. Then he was at one point the chief rabbi of Israel, and he had a few other rabbi positions in Israel as well. Gaon Olam, Tamid Chacham Atzum. Rav Tzadka, the rabbi upstairs, used to consider him his Rabbo Muvak. I remember the day Rabbi Mordechai Eliyahu passed away. I was in Queens. Rav Tzadka did Kriya. He ripped his shirt like as if a father passed away. Same criteria. He was a Gaon Olam in Nigla and Nistar and everything. He was a Gaon Olam. That maybe in certain circles he was less popular was because he had certain views that not everybody understood, but that doesn't take away from his Gaonut. He was a Gaon Olam, a real Gaon Olam. He had a very close relationship to the Baba Sali. Very close. How did his relationship with the Baba Sali start? Listen to the amazing story that he says. I'm going to tell you two stories at least from him, so you get a little glimpse of what it means to be a Gadol. He was, Mordechai Eliyahu at that point was the rabbi in Beersheba. When the Baba Sali came on one of his returns to Israel, the first few months he spent at Beersheba. After that I think he went to Yavne, then he went finally to Netivot, which is where he stayed. Originally he went to Jerusalem, by the way, on his first trip, but afterwards. We're talking about different trips. When he was in Beersheba, the chief rabbi of Beersheba was Rabbi Mordechai Eliyahu. Now, the Baba Sali was older, wiser, and holier. I'm only saying that not because I'm in the rabbi grading business, but because that's what I'm quoting Rabbi Mordechai Eliyahu's words. One day he comes home from the Beit Din. He was Av Beit Din. Came back from the Beit Din 4:30 in the afternoon. And he's tired. It was a long day. And he has a long night ahead of him because he has to write Piskei Halacha for the next day based on who's coming the next day, that he knows he has to be ready for what to answer this one, what to answer that one, to give each one what they need to hear. And he's about to sit down to start eating something and writing simultaneously, in preparation for tomorrow, and there's a knock on the door. He opens the door, sees a guy, he doesn't know who the guy is. He tells him, listen, there's a big rabbi in town, his name's the Baba Sali, Rabbi Yisrael Abuchatzira, I don't know if you ever heard of him. Whether you heard of him or not makes no difference. He said that you have to come to his house right now. He wants you to come to his house right now. He said he heard of the Abuchatzira family, specifically Rabbi Yisrael Abuchatzira he didn't hear of. He knew they were holy people. He said, what does the rabbi want from me? Tell him I'm busy, I'm this. He said, the rabbi warned me in advance. I shouldn't take any excuses from you, no matter what, and I have to bring you to my house, to his house. He said that, now maybe it's an emergency, maybe the rabbi needs something, he's new in Israel. He said, I'll go a few minutes, I'll see what he needs, it was close by, come back. Went to the Baba Sali's house, comes into the house, the Baba Sali takes him in, big kavod, tells him you're probably tired and hungry, you didn't eat today, you went to the Beit Din all day, and starts feeding him. And Moroccans have big hearts when it comes to food. And the food is spilling. And then the arak, of course, that was the Baba Sali's trademark. And this rabbi doesn't get it. That's what he called me for, to feed me. I have a wife, she can feed me. Me, a course after course after course after course after course. And the time's clicking. And he's like, he has things to do with it. A couple hours go by, finally the Suda is over. He thinks, okay, Birkat Hamazon, he's going home. He doesn't understand what happened here just now, but one way or the other he's going home. Baba Sali's not done. Finished Birkat Hamazon, they start talking Chidushei Torah. What do you think about this question? What do you think about that darash? What do you think about that hidush? What do you think about this? This went on from 4:30 p.m. until 3 a.m. The Baba Sali held in between food, arak, and chidushei Torah. That's a pretty large amount of hours. And Mordechai Eliyahu says he was embarrassed to leave because it was the Baba Sali. He realized he was a gaon, but at the same time, the whole thing was weird. When he comes to leave the Baba Sali's house finally, Baba Sali tells his shamash, You walk with him until the house, and until you don't see him inside the house with the door locked, you don't leave. This is what he tells the shamash. Shamash he is. The rabbi said. The rabbi said. He goes with him. They go to the house, and they come, and the shamash and the Rabbi Mordechai Eliyahu see 4 police officers waiting outside his door. That he wasn't expecting at 3 a.m. He says, "What are you guys doing here?" They say, "You're Rabbi Mordechai Eliyahu." "Yeah." "You're from the Beit Din." "Yeah." "You have any way to identify yourself?" "Yeah." He identifies himself. He says, "Did I do anything wrong? Is there a problem?" I said, "No." I said, "Why weren't you home the last bunch of hours?" "Here's the shamash, he'll tell you." "I don't know. I don't know myself. Maybe this guy could explain it." He has a rabbi, just came from Morocco, called me, fed me, gave me the drink, talked to me, learning for hours and hours, didn't let me go, finally let me go. Out of respect, I stayed. So one of the police officers says, "Who's that rabbi?" He says, "The Baba Sali." He says, "Go back to his house, tell him thank you, he saved your life." So he says, "How did he save my life?" They said, "You remember yesterday you did a get for so-and-so, this and this person?" I said, "Of course." He said, "Well, the guy's angry at you." When somebody's angry, what does he do? Irrational, crazy things. So he came with a gun. He was standing outside Rabbi Mordechai Eliyahu's house, waiting for him to go down to either mincha or beat something, to shoot him, to kill him. The Baba Sali, Beruach Kocho, just came to that town, saw that there's a Jew about to kill a Talmid Chacham, and said, "We have to save the Talmid Chacham," called him to his house. At 2:30 in the morning, the guy gave up and left, and the cops caught him, and he admitted to what he was planning on doing. And Rabbi Mordechai Eliyahu, half an hour later, came like a king back home. That's literal Ruach HaKodesh of somebody who lives up until not that many years ago. When I was a child, he was still alive. I have a picture sitting on the Baba Sali's lap, even though the Baba Sali never let pictures. Gadlut. So Rabbi Mordechai Eliyahu, from there on, Nafsho Kshura B'Nafsho. Their souls became very attached. He became a big student of the Baba Sali. So he said over another story has to do with Orach Chaim HaKadosh. When he was the chief rabbi of Israel, I might be off with the years, but I'm trying to remember from my yeshiva days and whatever. I think 84 he was the chief rabbi of Israel. When you write a sefer and you have askama from the chief rabbi of Israel, it's like more respectful. Some guy wrote a sefer, and he brought it to Rabbi Mordechai Eliyahu, that was the chief rabbi, and to give him askama on a sefer. Mordechai Eliyahu was a responsible man. He didn't just give askamot. He first went through the sefer to make sure you can't put your name on what's not right. He told the guy, "Come back in 2 weeks." The guy came back 2 weeks later. He said, "I'm sorry, I can't give you askama." Tells him, "Why can't you give me askama?" He said, "Because I saw you wrote in your sefer that the Orach Chaim HaKadosh made a mistake here, and he forgot this Gemara. If you could write such a thing about the Orach Chaim HaKadosh, a sefer like that, I can't give askamat." The Orach Chaim HaKadosh didn't forget any Gmarot, and he didn't forget nothing. If anybody forgot, it's you. Something's wrong with you, not with the Orach Chaim. Sometimes I'm down in Kav Zchut that they mean it out of purity, so Hashem enjoys it, but at the end of the day, it's not nice. I see guys learning, what Abaye says doesn't make sense. No, what you say doesn't make sense. Now go break your head until you understand what Abaye says. The problem, if a gadol says something, the problem is not if you don't understand, the problem is not by him, it's by you. Go figure out what it is. Where you're going wrong. No. So, the Baba Sali, so Mordechai Eliyahu wasn't willing to give him askama. This guy was very broken because he wanted the askama. He knew it would be good for sales of his sefer. He was trying to figure out a way to influence Mordechai Eliyahu to give it to him anyway. So he knew a different rabbi of a different city. Mordechai Eliyahu said the name, I don't remember the name, who knew Mordechai Eliyahu well. He went to this guy and he told him, "Maybe you could speak to Mordechai Eliyahu. You know me, I'm a legit person. I didn't mean any bad by what I wrote. It's just in Torah, we're allowed to disagree sometimes." He said, "Listen, if Mordechai Eliyahu says no, there's no way to change it. He's a ish halacha, straight as an arrow, no politics, no games. There's only one person in the world that can influence him, and that's the person he respects most, the Baba Sali. Go to Netivot, Ask the Baba Sali to influence him. If the Baba Sali speaks to him, then he'll get a thing. Back then, there was no cars and this and that. Like today, everybody has a car. You know, you go from one place to the other in an hour and a half of traffic. Buses upon buses. You know, there's hours and hours we're talking about. So he was already by Mordechai Eliyahu. Now then he went to this rabbi. Now he has to go to the Baba Sali. You know, each trip is a whole agenda. But he's determined. He has to get his askama. He goes to the Baba Sali. Tells the Baba Sali the whole story. The Baba Sali doesn't even answer him. He just tells him, I can't help you. And he throws him out. So now he's even more disappointed. He's heartbroken. He's heartbroken. He goes from the Baba Sali's house to the Or HaChaim HaKadosh's grave. Was buried in Har HaZetim in Jerusalem. To go to Har HaZetim today in Jerusalem, during the day, you need security. And back, there's an Arab village on top that is not like Saudi Arabia. They didn't make peace with us yet. It's not a Dubai. Might be a Dubai of flying bullets. That's more or less the Dubai that it is. But they didn't make peace with us. He went, middle of the night, dark, this, that, alone, went to the Or HaChaim HaKadosh's kever. Prayed, cried his heart out. I'm learning Torah, I didn't understand, I said what I said. And either I understand, then I'll change what I said, and if not, I have to stick to what I think. And now my sefer is going to be not kosher, the chief rabbi doesn't want to approve of it, the Baba Sali is throwing me out, and this and that. Crying his heart out. And in his prayers he says, and if I wrote something that wasn't the right way to word it, I never meant it, I ask for forgiveness. And 2 hours later, he hears a voice come out of the grave. It's good it wasn't me, I would have had a heart attack, I would have been buried right near. Here's a voice coming out of the grave. What's the voice? The voice tells him, I'm the Or HaChaim HaKadosh, and what you wrote about me was wrong. What Rabbi Mordechai Eliyahu explained to you, the pshat and what I meant was right, and therefore all your questions don't even start. But don't worry, you meant L'Shem Shamayim, I know it, and I forgive you, and there's no problem, everything's fine. This guy hears this, leaves the grave, goes to Rabbi Mordechai Eliyahu's house straight. Gets to his house, 4 o'clock in the morning, he's knocking, an elderly Jew, Rabbi Mordechai Eliyahu wakes up, sees an elderly Jew, it looks like an Orthodox Jew, by the way. Opens, he forgot who he was already. Tells him, Rabbi, the Or HaChaim told me you were right. The rabbi looked at him like he needed a psychiatric unit. What Or HaChaim told you? He says, everything okay? It's 4 o'clock in the morning, you have nothing better to do with yourself right now? Tells him the whole story. I was by the grave and I cried for 2 hours and a voice came out of the grave and told me and this and that. Mordechai told him with all due respect, thank you for the compliment that I'm right, but beyond that, ask, am I not getting for your sefer? Hallucinations, I think you have severe. And I don't believe the story for a second. And I wish you hatzlacha in whatever you do. Hashem shall help you. He sent him on his way. This Jew still didn't give up. From there, in the middle of the night, he's going to I think it was Netivot at that time, back to the Baba Sali. Another whole project of transportation. Took him from 4:15 till 9 in the morning to get to the Baba Sali again. Now he's already up for a day straight like that, going from place to place. When he walked into the Baba Sali's house, the Baba Sali saw his face, and he told him right away, he told the Shamashim, bring food and drinks, emergency, give him to eat and drink. Baba Sali was scared that something was going to happen to him. He was an elderly person. He told the Baba Sali, I didn't pray shacharit yet, I'm not allowed to eat. He says, Pikuach nefesh, eat now, I don't want to hear about anything. They gave him to eat, they made sure his strength came back to him. Then the Baba Sali told him, okay, now go pray. So he went to pray. When he went to pray, he came back to the Baba Sali, and Baba said, yeah, what do you want now? I already threw you out once, what do you want now? You want to get thrown out again? So he tells him the whole story. I went to the Or HaChaim HaKadosh's grave, tells him the whole thing. Then he tells him, I went to Mordechai Eliyahu, he told me that I'm hallucinating, and doesn't want to give me it. The Baba Sali looks at him and says, I'm going to speak to Mordechai Eliyahu. He's going to give you an askama on the Sefer. Just change those words that are not appropriate, because you said yourself that he said that Mordechai Eliyahu's opinion was right and not yours. But beyond that, I'm going to speak to him to give you the askama on the Sefer. So the guy felt good, Baba Sali's siding with him, so he took advantage. So he says, so why did Mordechai Eliyahu throw me out like that in the middle of the night? Why didn't he listen to me? So Baba Sali told him with a smirk on his face, because the Chaim was Moroccan, and you're Moroccan, and I'm Moroccan, so we understand each other's language. Right? Mordechai Eliyahu is not Moroccan, he doesn't understand that these things could happen. I don't know what that says about the Moroccan community, everybody should decide on their own. Twist it any way that's convenient for you. I'm just telling you a story that I heard, I watched, is better to say, on a video by Mordechai Eliyahu himself, not somebody said in his name. Himself said the story. Koach of an Adam Gadol. Because Ruach HaKodesh knew no bounds. I'll give you a great story that a British Jew, he passed away a few years ago, said he had a student in England. He was a very big student. He was Ashkenazi, he was Hasidic. His name was Stern. Michael Stern, I think his first name was. So Michael Stern had kids, and married off his kids. He was a wealthy man. He used to come to Israel a lot to be with the Baba Sali. And once, he was in England, and he had a daughter that was due any minute. Kids to the doctor started saying she has complications, the situation is very bad, whatever. At one point they said that they have a max of a 48-hour window period to decide if to do a surgery or not, and the surgery means that only one person's living, either the mother or the child. Both are not going to live. Nobody had anything to say at that point. There's halakha questions about this, by the way. And the halakha is chayecha kodmim, we saved the mother, but whatever. He was the Baba Sali's Talmud, so to him there's no chokhmas. Daughter, not daughter. He said goodbye to everybody, ran to the airport, took a plane, went to Israel. Went to Israel, straight to the Baba Sali's house, storms into the Baba Sali's house in a panic, and he starts screaming, Rebbe, my daughter, pikuach nefesh, they say either she's going to live or the baby's going to live, and this and that, it can't happen, blah, blah, and he's, all emotional and losing it. So I felt bad for him. He thought for a couple of minutes, then he takes some arak, pours it into a cup, he gives it to him, and he says, L'chaim. He said, L'chaim for what? He said, your daughter's alive, and she just had 2 healthy twins. He didn't believe it deep down. They just said surgery, dying, this, that. Twins? The doctor said she's having 1, not 2. But the Baba Sali says, L'chaim, L'chaim, fine, L'chaim. He tells the Baba Sali he didn't pray mincha yet, and he's going to go pray mincha and he's going to come back. So I says, yeah, sure. He wasn't going to pray mincha. There was no cell phones then. He had to make a phone call. So he went to the post office, that's where he made phone calls from, paid them whatever money, and called home, the United Kingdom. And his wife picks up and says, a miracle happened, don't ask. 15 minutes ago, she had 2 healthy babies, not just 1. We got more than we bargained for. And everybody's well. The doctors don't know how to explain it, a miracle. He has the news, now he's the happiest man in the world ever. He's going to race back to the Baba Sali to share the celebration. Goes running back to the Baba Sali's house. When he walks in, the Baba Sali picks up his head and says, some people don't believe when I tell them that they had 2 healthy children. No, they have to go to the post office. What should we do? Before he says a word. And he says, now can we make a real l'chaim? He pours him again, more arak. And by the Baba Sali, there was no shot cups, 1 ounce like they do in America. This is a small cup. There was the real big Moroccan cup, so it was beer mug style. Pours him another one. They celebrate. And the guy's all happy, and he's thanking the Baba Sali and blessing him and offering him anything in the world. The Baba Sali turns to him and says, you didn't pray mincha yet. You might want to go pray mincha now. It's getting late. But that was the koach of the emunat tzaddik that people had. It used to be a simple emunas chacham. If the chacham said so, that's the way it is. And when a person was lacking in that, the chacham picked up on it and called him out on it. He said, today, what? There's no chachamim, there's no emunat chachamim, there's no nothing, it doesn't start at all. The rabbi doesn't know what he's talking about. Which might be true in some cases, by the way, because they're fake, they're not real, but the real ones do. And sometimes, through seeing clear nisim of Gdolei Yisrael, we can regain some handle on Emunat Chachamim, which is probably the thing that we're lacking most in our generation. And because we're still in the midst of a health crisis that looks like it's going to be here for a while still, so I'm going to tell you about crises and the way the Chachamim looked at it. Baba Sali's times in Israel, there was another great tzaddik. This story I heard from a rabbi that we donate a lot to, named Yitzchak Grossman. He lives in Migdal HaEmek now for many, many years. Big tzaddik. Built up all these organizations to save kids and schools. Unreal. Chad bedoreh. The amount of Jewish lives that this rabbi saved, there's no way to explain. Some of you guys might know him because a few years ago when you were still allowed to go to a basketball stadium or whatever, the Knicks used to have a game against Maccabi Tel Aviv every year, pre-season, a fake game. It was a fundraiser for his organizations, and he would throw out the first ball. So he became famous in America like that. It was for fundraising reasons he embarrassed himself. He was the farthest thing from this stuff. So he knew the Baba Sali very well. And he knew the Baba Sali as a result of an interesting story. He didn't know him. When he was 17, he had a brother who was 17, he was 16. His brother told him that the Baba Sali, there's a man named the Baba Sali. People say about him he's very holy. We like tzaddikim. Let's go find out. Let's go to him. Baba Sali didn't have all these gabayim, pay money to get in, do this, do that. Yeah, you knocked. There was one shamash, and you waited, and he let you in. That was it. Baba Sali hated honor, and that he ran away from it. So these two brothers went. They knocked on the door. Happened to be, in their case, the Baba Sali himself answered the door. He turned to them, he said, what do you want? They were stumped. They didn't really know what they came from. They just heard he's tzaddik. So they said, we want a bracha. So they said, what do you want a bracha for? Tell me what you want a bracha for. So the older brother tells him, listen, I'm 17. My younger brother's 16. And we have some lineage that's connected to Breslov. Reb Nachman was very strict that all boys have to get married before they're 20. So give us a bracha that we should find the shidduch before we're 20. So he turns to the older brother and he says, yeah, you should find a good shidduch relatively soon and easily and whatever, a warm bracha. And then he turns to the 16-year-old and he says, and right after he gets engaged, you'll get engaged too. Rav Grossman says their engagement was exactly 8 weeks apart. And it wasn't planned like that. It was a whole story on its own. Yad Hashem, how it happened. Then they realized this man has power in his mouth. Whatever he says happens. So they started being very connected. Grossman was also very connected to one of the previous Rebbe's, Mishmot Chalel. Malach Elokim Tzvakot. There's no way to describe in words what he was. Anything that you can imagine, multiply it by 1,000,000. And then maybe you'll get to a glimpse.
Sorry, someone has a white BMW back in the driveway?
SUV?
No.
No? Then...
Black in the driveway.
White BMW. Maybe upset.
Anyway, I don't know if he knows what an SUV is. If he does, then maybe I have the answer. But anyway, one way or the other, the kids said about us, so Grossman was very close to Moshe Chalelova. Moshe Chalelova used to go every year, until now the Lelva Hasidim go. Adayom. Every year, Parashat Ba'alotcha, they go to Miron, to Hashem Baruch Hu. Why? I don't know. There's a reason, but I don't know. Thousands of them. But Melech Biderman on a normal year, not COVID restricted, thousands and thousands. Biderman is Lelv. All the whole Shalshelet, the Parashat Ba'alotcha, they always went to Hashem Baruch Hu. In addition to Lag BaOmer. One year the Baba Sali heard that the Lelava is going to be Parashat Ba'alotcha by Hashem Baruch Hu. He told his Shamash, Motzei Shabbat, he wants to go immediately to Miron. Now there's a distance. It takes time. You don't know when the Rebbe is going to leave. You don't want to miss him. At the Baba Sali, that wasn't an issue. The Baba Sali always asked, when do we have to get there? And he told the driver to close his eyes, and they got there. That was the way he lived. I spoke to his driver personally a few times. Told me countless stories like that. They'd sit in the road, parked in traffic. The Baba Sali would say, haram on the time and that, people are waiting for me. He would tell the driver, 1 minute, he would take his jalabiya, cover the driver's eyes on the road, not so safe, don't learn from this. And he'd find himself in a tivot a few seconds later. I wish I knew that trick. That would make my life very easy. It was based on Shemot HaKdoshim that come out of certain psukim. It was normal to the Baba Sali. That wasn't a question to him at all. He didn't let his driver fill up gas for I don't know how many years till he told him the blessing was over. He drove the same car without filling up gas for years straight. A man who lived amongst us still 35 years ago. He was bad for the Arab economy. He didn't use gas. So Moshe Leleve, they went Motzei Shabbat, however they got there, and he met him. Moshe Leleve wasn't well at that point, couldn't speak much, whatever it was. Baba Sali looked at him, he looked at that. There wasn't one word, physical word, exchanged between them. They stared at each other for a certain amount of time. The Baba Sali said, I'm done, it's time to leave. And Rabbi Grossman was very close to the Leleve, wanted to know what went on over there. This was a little bit of an interesting scene. Normally, at least a head shake, something, I don't know. Here, they just stared at each other and parted ways. So the Leleve told him like this, the Baba Sali made up with me a deal, that I'm going to take care of half, he's going to take care of the other half, and instead of Israel having to go to another war, the Arabs are going to fight between themselves, and that'll be instead of the fight with Israel. Again, the Leleve said he'll take care of half, he's going to take care of the other half, and instead of the Arabs fighting with the Jews, they're going to fight between themselves, and that'll be mechaper on the war that's supposed to happen to Israel. A few months later, or a couple of months later, the Iran-Iraq war began. A war that until today, not Iran and not Iraq knows how to explain why they got into it and why they got out of it. But us, tonight, no. I don't know if the Baba Sali was on the Iraq side or the Iran side, I'm not sure. But one did that, one did the other, they fought and Am Yisrael had peace. This was the koach of Gdolei Olam. Just to understand the extent, I'll tell you a cute story that I know firsthand, because I know the person involved. The Baba Sali had a son that died 9 months before him. The Baba Sali later on said that one of the reasons that he's dying is from tsar, that his son died. His name was Rabbi Meir, Baba Meir Abu Chatzira. Baba Meir's sons I know very well. Baba Meir, the Baba Sali used to send people to get blessings from him. He was also like the Baba Sali, he had big powers, very, very big powers. There was once a very famous story in Israel that there was a guy who was a very high-ranking person in the police. At the underground, the mafia kidnapped his son. Very disgusting situation, very famous in the news and that. It's a big deal. The Israelis, the Shabak, the Mossad, the this, the that, everybody was involved. Like, this is already a red line that nobody crosses, even in the underworld. 3 days went by and they didn't even hear a sign of life from the kid. They weren't getting anywhere. This police personnel had a secretary that was a Sephardic Jew. Sephardic Jews, even if they don't observe, they have a connection. She told him there's a holy tzaddik, the Baba Sali, he's known to make miracles, maybe go to him. Right away he told his driver, Baba Sali. They went to the Baba Sali heard the story, he told him, I'm sorry, there's nothing I could do. But I don't want to leave you alone with nothing, we have to save your son. Go to my son, Baba Meir, he could help you. So he told him. So he went to Baba Meir. And this is the way this not religious police general, whatever you want to call it, he was very high ranking in the police, sergeant, whatever, but a lot higher than a sergeant. In Israel there's different rankings in here. Said over. Baba Meir took his hand, went like this, 10 minutes straight, total silence. After 10 minutes he asked one of the shamash to bring a pen and paper. He sketched a map of streets with exact sketches of buildings and houses. One window, one door. Said this is a few blocks in the United Kingdom, in this town. This is the names of the streets. These are the houses and the way they look. Your son is in the basement in this house by this window. Send the forces to go there. They'll get him out. They'll bring him back safely. Israel contacted the UK military. They were willing to get involved. They did what they had to do. Exactly to the arrow that he pointed, that's the window they pulled him out of. They brought him back to Israel safe and sound. This policeman was like, a guy in the police, he wasn't religious. He was blown away. He wasn't used to things like this. He says, this is not normal. The whole Mossad and Shabak, couldn't come up with one iota of information. This guy in 10 minutes drew the script, exactly. They couldn't deal with this. So he went back first to Baba Meir to say thank you, but then he went back to the Baba Sali. He said, how does your son know how to do these things? And the Baba Sali told him the secret. He said, when you don't see what you're not supposed to see, you see everything that you're supposed to see. The Baba Sali never saw, he testified about himself. In his life, he never saw a woman except for his wives. He had more than one wife. And it's an argument if he said his daughter or not. That could be argued. I don't think so. Baba Meir was just like that as well. When you don't see what you don't have to see, then you'll see clearly exactly what you have to see. That was that power of Ruach HaKodesh on top of that power of Torah and everything else. The Ruach HaKodesh knew no boundaries. It was mind-boggling, the things that they did. Huh? I know a guy, today he's not a boy anymore, he's older than me. He was born with a rare genetic disease. Back then also we didn't know much about genetic diseases, and he couldn't walk. For a few years, his parents, doctors, this, that, they took him around the world. Nothing doing. They made peace with the fact he'll never be able to walk. One day, the Ashkenaz family, Gerech Hasidim, they heard about the Baba Sali, they decided to go. They took the kid with them in a wheelchair. They went in, Baba Sali saw the kid, and he told them, why are you standing? The parents got offended. You know how many places around the world we went? So he started explaining to Baba Sali what's going on. He thought maybe he's old, he doesn't realize. Baba Sali again yells at him, why aren't you standing? Now they say, this is already funny. There's something we don't. So they stayed quiet. Kid didn't respond. The Baba Sali told him, you need a push? Baba Sali always had a cane. Took his cane and he gave him a jab in the stomach. The kid got up. Baba Sali said, come to me. He walked and I know who the person is personally. He's perfectly healthy today. He told me the worst medical condition he had ever since was once they thought he had the flu and at the end there was a false alarm. Other than that, 100% healthy, never had a problem in his life. He said, never even strep throat, never a headache, never nothing. One push of the Baba Sali's cane. Just get up. What? This was known. This was Ma'asim B'chol Yom. There wasn't a day that this didn't happen in the house. That was like standard procedure over there. Now what's the pele? Normally rabbis like this are given tons of money. The Baba Sali was given enormous amounts of money. Because in the Sephardic Jewry especially, and in the Hasidic Jewry, they believed it was this gulat to give him money. They would throw money at him. The Baba Sali would accept it, and he would put it in his pocket. But at the end of the day, there was never a penny left. Because if anybody came in and told him he's having trouble with panasah, he stuck his hand in his pocket, didn't look if it's dollars, shekels, lirot, this, that, euros, whatever he had, boom, gave him. So by the time the day was over, there was at least a couple of people that complained about money. So there was never anything left. Never anything left. Gone. Everything gone. That's how you know if a Talmid Chacham is real or a Talmid Chacham is not so real. Talmid Chacham is busy, everything for himself, so then you have to wonder what's really going on. But if he's giving everything away for others, then you know we're dealing with somebody real. And that Ahavat Yisrael, that commitment to Klal Yisrael, not to see Klal Yisrael suffer, knows no boundaries. Reb Mordechai Eliyahu, and this is my conclusion for tonight, said that the Baba Sali himself told him, my whole life I waited to see Mashiach. It's true. Every other word that came out of his mouth was Mashiach related. To the point, in Israel, if somebody knocks on the door, and you open the door, and there's somebody in the kitchen who doesn't see who's coming. This is before the days of security cameras and everything we have that we know everything. So a mother would ask her kid, Mi ba, who came? Every time somebody in the Baba Sali's house said those words, Mi ba, and the Baba Sali heard it, he would stand up from his seat thinking Mashiach came to greet him. So he has to stand up out of respect for Mashiach. That was the level of desire he lived with to see Mashiach. On multiple occasions, he told his children and his students that he knows for sure from Shamayim that he's going to see Mashiach. Mashiach's coming in his times, he knows for sure beyond reasonable doubt. B'sof Yamav, towards the end of his life, he called Mordechai Eliyahu, who was one of his close students. He gave him a gift, a watch, which was also interesting. Mordechai wasn't the gift type. And then he told him like this. He said, my whole life you know that how much I was sure I would see Mashiach, and I wanted to see Mashiach. And it could still happen. But there's a big decree on Am Yisrael, and by Menan, a lot of people around the world are going to die. And I tried for a few months now to stop it. And I couldn't do anything, and I couldn't stop it. Last night I negotiated with HaKadosh Baruch Hu that I'll give up on seeing Mashiach now, and he could take me, and that should save Am Yisrael. In a few days I'm going to pass away. He told us to him, I think it was a week before Rosh Chodesh Shvat, and the Baba Sali's Yahrzeit is Daled Shvat, Sunday night I think comes out this year. Meaning even his death was to be Kadesh Am Yisrael and to protect Am Yisrael. Even the last breath of his life was the Kedushat Am Yisrael. Was to help Klal Yisrael. Huh? These were people that got the great heights. It's important to hear these stories, not for story time, that you could do on your own. More than maybe we should merit to bring back a little bit of the Emunat Chachamim. We lost our touch with Emunat Chachamim. We lost everything that has to do with Emunat Chachamim. It's a shame because it's very recent. It wasn't like that. I remember even by Rav Shach Zitzal. We went into Rav Shach and he told us to do something. Even if it made no sense, it was the opposite extreme of any common sense. Nobody thought twice. It wasn't even a test to listen to him. If you didn't listen to him, you would feel stupid. It was a no-brainer that that's the way it is. It wasn't a question at all. Today, okay, that rabbi says this, I'll find another rabbi to say something else. The whole idea of Emunat Chachamim is gone. And by the way, that's probably the main reason why the Chachamim don't have the power to do the Nisim that they used to have. Because the Chacham, part of the power comes from his Kedusha, that's the initial power, and the rest of the power comes from the Emunah of people. Vayaminu ba'Hashem u'Moshe avdo. First time that we learn about Emunat Chachamim. When Am Yisrael had Emunah in Moshe Rabbeinu as the servant of Hashem, as a Kadosh Elyon, that's what gave Moshe Rabbeinu the power to execute the different miracles in Egypt. If we lose the Emunat Chachamim, not only are we harming ourselves, we're also harming the Chacham, because really he could do so much more for us. And as a result of our skepticism and lack of faith, we're destroying it for us, not for him, for us. And that's a real churban. That makes sense. And why would somebody want to do that, quite frankly? What do you have to gain? What do you have to gain? And everybody needs a Rebbe, and everybody needs I'm talking about an Adam Gadol. I stress that, because today people get confused between speakers and Talmidei Chachamim. There's normally a contradiction. Everybody needs Adam Gadol in his life. There's a connection to, even if it's not a direct connection, at least for a bracha, for an eitzah, and for nothing else, for shmirah, for protection. And we see clearly that those who have that, Matzliach, and those Chazal say that even if the Chacham is so wrong that it's against everything natural in the world, Hashem is going to change the nature to make him right. If you remember 4 weeks ago, I said something very strong here. I said when the vaccines were discussed, I was very hesitant. I know a lot about the vaccine business for different reasons that some of you know. I'm kind of in that business. But I was very hesitant. The moment the words came out of Rav Chaim Kanievsky's mouth, that whoever takes the vaccine is doing a mitzvah v'nishmatem mohod, and it was reiterated again, despite what some clown went and lied in his name, then that's it. In Shamayim, they decided that the vaccine is safe. At least for Am Yisrael. I don't know about for the Goyim. Don't bring stories from Goyim. For Am Yisrael. Not only safe, that it's going to work. Not because of Pfizer. No offense to Pfizer. Their stock shouldn't go up. They don't deserve it. Because a Gdol Torah said out of his mouth. Then at that point, HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself goes and changes Sidrei B'riyah. Makes no difference what the facts are anymore. And whenever the corruption here stops and maybe we'd be allowed to get vaccines, despite our age or situation, when I go and raise my sleeve to get a vaccine one day, and I openly say I will be doing so, I will think in my mind, I'm being mekayem 2 mitzvot aseh d'oraita. Number 1, v'nishmatem od l'nafshotechem. Number 2, mitzvah lishmoa l'kol divrei chachamim. There's a mitzvah to listen to the words of the chachamim. Those 2 mitzvot for sure will vaccinate me. More than 2 doses of Pfizer's stuff that they're going to stick in me. That simple emunah pshuta started getting lost. I said I was done. I got one more story I got to tell you. We're talking about emunat chachamim. I have 4 friends. Now I lost touch with 3 out of 4 because bli ayin hara, they're big Rashi Yeshivot today. One, he's also a big Rosh Shiva, but he's a nice person. You know, he has more patience for simple people like me, so we're more in touch. And these 4 friends learned in Ponevezh. I didn't learn in Ponevezh ever. But I used to go to Bnei Brak a lot because I used to buy Rav Shach on Wednesdays. I got to know them through that. They would always want to hear from me. They would wait outside the house. What did Rav Shach say tonight and that? Because I knew better than them what their Rosh Shiva said. Once, it was before Chanukah, and they went into Rav Shach, and they told him, you know, that it was an off Shabbos. They get off for 2 days, 3 days, whatever it is. And Rav Shach, I don't know if it was random, Ruach Kodsho, whatever it was, he turned to them and he said, what's your plans for Shabbat? Now normally no yeshiva would even ask that. You were just in yeshiva for 8 weeks, you're going home, that's what your plans are. Shach obviously saw further than that. They were planning on going on a trip. They wouldn't lie to Rav Shach. They told him. They weren't doing anything wrong, it's vacation time. He said, we're going to Yam HaMelech for 3 days to rest. We need to rest. You know? These were good boys. We're talking about big, you know, top learners. Rav Shach told him, no, I don't think the roads on the way there are so safe. So he told him, Rebbe, don't worry, we'll rent a safe car, we'll drive safely, we won't do stupid things, this, that. No, Hashem shall watch over you. And he let them go. He hinted to them not to go. He didn't want to force, Rav Shach never forced his opinion on people, in general. They went. An hour and 15 minutes into the ride, they were almost there already. The car flipped over, went down a valley 28 meters. One of the 4 boys, the driver, was in a coma afterwards for 11 months. The fact that he's alive today, only Nisei Nisim could explain. There's no medical way to explain that he's alive. He's alive and healthy, he built a family. There's no way to explain. That came from one nu of Gdalado. No, the roads are not so safe. Honestly, when I heard the story, it didn't even surprise me, because they told me before they left that they're going. I told, are you crazy? Shach said, no, you're going to go? You're not scared? I said, I wouldn't leave my bedroom. I wouldn't even go home for Shabbat. I'd be so scared. He said the roads aren't safe. He's hinting to you something. No, he didn't mean it. If he would have wanted us to go, he knows how to tell us not to go. He would have told us. We would have listened to him. They wanted to go. Poor, you know, they were good kids, not troublemakers. Very, very good boys. That's the koach of a word that comes out of the mouth of a Talmid Chacham. Just a word that comes out of the mouth of a Talmid Chacham. Hashmocha should help. At the Schut Rabbi Yisrael Abu Chatzira and all the tzaddikim and all the generations, Be'ezah Hashem should be a melitz yosher on us, and the whole Klal Yisrael b'chlal b'frat, especially us. Hashem should watch us from all harm. We should be protected, healthy, safe. All our enemies should fall in front of us. Nobody should be able to harm us in any way. That's a new prayer that we have to say again in the climate today. And Be'ezah Hashem, we should be zocheh to see nisim and be poel nisim for Am Yisrael and to do chasadim gdolim v'atzumim. And like the Baba Sali was always yearning for Mashiach, we should yearn for Mashiach and be zocheh to see him b'meirav yameinu amen v'amen. Tizku